Be good. Go. We're on.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is the day after Thanksgiving. Thank you for being on the call. And it is an honor always for Dan and I to host this and to be part of your lives, and you are part of our lives. So thank you. Of course, the slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We shall persevere until we succeed. But, Thanksgiving, I just wanted to kind of just for us, Thanksgiving is really to be grateful for everything that we take for granted and for everything that we have. And they're also, it's a big word, Thanksgiving. So we take everything in the States that we have, everything in our lives, we take for granted. And it's only when we don't have some of these things, like Dan and I have been doing business, and Michael in South Africa. And for example, they have no internet for several hours of the day. They have no electricity. They don't have, that means they can't do anything for hours during the day. We've got all of these things that we take obviously for granted. We turn on the electricity, we turn on the internet, we've got a company that offers everything. We've got unlimited possibilities to shop, to have our own international shop. We get reliable payments. The company is always there for us. We've got absolutely no impediments. So I just wanted to start with saying I'm very grateful and appreciative from where I am, what I have, and where we are, where I am, and what I have, and what we are. So, and the other thing I just wanted to add quickly was that one thing I'm really, really grateful for are all the mistakes that I've made, from which I've learned, because we learn from our mistakes, hopefully, if we're aware, to become a better person. And I know that I have grown significantly by being in this business, by learning from my mistakes, and by being vulnerable and talking about them and sharing my mistakes and say, look, I really screwed up on this or that, and to be vulnerable and to share that, because our vulnerability makes us human. It makes us more accessible as a team, that we have obviously failed our way to wherever we are at the moment. So I don't want to go on about that, but basically that's just what I wanted to start with.
Just to expand on that, Lawrence, we do have so much to be grateful for here, so much to be thankful for. And if you're not maximizing what you have the ability to do, what you have the opportunity to do, then you're really squandering an opportunity that a lot of people around the world don't have. 7 billion people in the world. There's 350 million in the US, and a lot of us have the same opportunity. But if we're not taking advantage of that opportunity and doing what we can to be successful and utilizing those opportunities that come our way, really, then nobody is standing in your way except for yourself. So you have to think about what are those things in your mind that aren't allowing you to be your best self. And gratitude is a big part of who you are, and whether you're thankful for things and you have gratitude for those people in your life and for the opportunities that we have and for your personal growth. And so I wanted to share with you this morning kind of our little Thanksgiving prayer or story before we ate Thanksgiving dinner yesterday. And it's about gratitude. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. That was a little poem or story by Melody Beatty. And I thought it was a great way for us to, kind of be thankful for yesterday and all the things in past years, for those that came before us, from those that we've learned from the bountiful feast that we had yesterday, and the opportunities that we have to come before us. If you're not showing gratitude for those things, it's hard to really motivate yourself to move forward, because we need to be thankful for those things in our past. We need to be thankful for those things in our present, and we need to be thankful for those opportunities that we have coming up in the future.
Yeah, everything is a state of mind of our own belief system. And if we look into the scarcity and we dwell in the scarcity, then that is where we see everything with limitation. Whereas we are in the abundance world here. We have no excuses not to embrace and to be grateful for the mistakes that we learn from, but also from the successes that we have, because the unlimited possibilities we have. And you talk about I like that poem that you wrote, or that you mentioned, Dan, because a meal is something that also we kind of take for granted here. We just go and have a meal, and we're thinking about something else, and in fact it's a moment of communication. It's a moment of being able to share. They say let's break bread. That's an expression that some countries have. In other words, let's have lunch, but let's break some bread, where it means let's sit down and we can have a conversation, we can communicate. And we are in such a hurry all the time. We run through things. I mean, I've actually had moments when we all have, where we're having a lunch standing up somewhere because we don't have time to sit down and enjoy it. Well, I think that's not a good thing. And we can afford, time-wise, if we make it, to live in the abundance, to absolutely understand that there is nothing that we cannot achieve, that we cannot have here in the States. There's nothing at all. We have everything, every possibility. And we make that opportunity from just a simple meal that we may have, to imagining that to knowing that it's a feast compared to many other places that have nothing. So I don't want to go into this, soap opera stuff, but it is important that we have this attitude of strength and of abundance and of opportunity that we have. There's nothing to stop us. The only thing we have are the cobwebs in our minds.
Absolutely. And one of the things, when I was taking notes for today, I was looking at some things from the book Unbleep Yourself by Gary Bishop. I didn't know quite how I was going to mention that book without being vulgar, but it's about getting out of your head and into your life. And one of those things that you can do in your life, or integrate into your life, is having acceptance for your actions, having acceptance for your for the things that you say in your head, those beliefs that you have, those things that you say to yourself, those words that you use to describe things in daily life. Like, if you say you can't a lot, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say you can't a lot, that's going to come true. You need to have a more positive attitude about what's achievable for you. And every single person on this call, has shown up the day after Thanksgiving to be here, because you're here every single Friday, and you're the people that show up every day. It doesn't matter whether it's, a holiday, whether it's, your birthday or whatever it may be, you're showing up. And so you have that positive attitude to get on here no matter what. But we really need to emphasize the need to get tough on ourselves, or tougher on ourselves. I think a lot of times we're happy where we're at in life. We're comfortable. We're in that comfort zone, which is, mediocrity for most people. We need to get out of our heads. We need to get tougher on ourselves and stop repeating the same destructive behaviors over and over. Whether that's, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Whether that's, having destructive or negative conversations with yourself, or using destructive or negative words when you're describing yourself, or, whatever it may be. You need to have that love for yourself, get out of your head, start having those positive conversations with yourself and repeating to yourself that you can achieve these things. That's all about changing your language. If you want to lose weight, you tell yourself, I'm losing weight. You don't say, I'm gonna lose weight. You say, I'm losing weight, or I am exercising. I'm not, I'm gonna, get gonna out of your vocabulary, get can't out of your vocabulary, because those things are limiting. Don't say that's impossible. I mentioned this last week. Our kids say I can't all the time, and I'm trying to break them of that, because that's an excuse, to not do something because you don't want to do it. That's what they say when I know they can do it, but they don't feel like doing it because they're being lazy. They say, I can't. I'm like, I know you can, just do it. So we need to get tougher on ourselves and tougher on some of those people that we want to help in our lives.
And make it a game. If we look at something as a problem, I had a thing, and I think I mentioned it even last week. The size of the challenge is directly proportional to the emotion with which we see it. I mean, I've had that motto for years. Bless you, Carol. It's okay. So it's if we look at a problem as a game, I mean, some people actually do problem solving as a pastime. And if we look at our problems, if we look at our lives and we look at the challenges, and we look at it as a game of chess or a game of anything, then it's not such a burden. It's not a weight. It's a game. It's, wow, okay, I failed it that way. How can, maybe if I go this way, I can fix it. No, that's also a problem. Wait a minute, let me go this way. Let me go that way. But if we look at whatever we want in our lives as something that we know we can achieve, anything, we can achieve it. Then, and if we look at it as saying, this is fun, I'm going to enjoy doing this. I mean, for example, me personally, I can think of nothing more difficult than to go and climb mountains, with danger of falling off and all this sort of thing. But Dan finds it fun. And if I was to go with Dan, he'd actually point out the fun of it, of putting your foot in a little ledge this big so that you can, balance yourself on it. Once you've balanced on that and you've achieved it, you can say, wow, I can now balance on something even smaller, and make fun, have fun with whatever you're doing, and you'll achieve the goals. But it's a little bit at a time. And we talk about, we talked about eat the frog before. Do the hard things first, but look at it with an attitude of, that's fine. I'm just going to take it in my stride. This is the most difficult thing I've got to do today. I've got to take it in my stride. So it's an attitude thing of being in the abundant world of our minds.
And you mentioned problems, and I think we need to get it in our minds that every problem is solvable. Any issue is solvable. Anything that you come across that you need to control in your life, that everything's solvable. It's just coming up with the solution to that problem. And just because you haven't found that solution yet just means that you haven't spent enough time working on that problem. Eventually you're going to figure it out. So we need to look at problems as a positive thing, and from a positive mindset, that we can solve that problem, any problem that's thrown our way. But ultimately, we need to be a foster for change, or foster the will for change, in our lives. We're so used to that, the mediocrity, or living in our little comfort zone and living in our little bubbles, that it's hard to step outside of that. But I talk about this a lot, and I firmly believe that to do great things, to be successful, you do need to have some form of sacrifice in your life. It's not easy. You have to be ready to take the risks to get where you want in your life. Are you willing to work 80 hours every week? Are you prepared to skip holidays? Will you put everything on the line to live out your dreams? Are you able to embrace uncertainty? Success is unpredictable. So there's a lot of uncertainty about that. And with growth comes even greater problems that you need to solve. Even if you work smart and work hard, success is still unpredictable. So you always have to be willing to shift outside that comfort zone to be successful. You have to be able to keep going no matter what. True restlessness, Gary Bishop says in his book, he says, true restlessness comes when the only thing you have left is restlessness. When it seems that all is lost and all hope and evidence for success have long since vanished, restlessness is that fuel that drives you through. That restlessness to always be successful, that never ending, I don't know what word I want to use, that never ending want, that never ending urge to be successful drives you to do whatever it takes and to embrace sacrifice to get where you want to be.
Actually, I like that. Embrace sacrifice. This is something that I don't know if it was Nathan that was saying it, or if I was listening to somebody. I was reading something this week, but there were two things that you mentioned there. One was, what are you willing to give up to succeed? In other words, we all should give something. We should, but we all can opt to give something up in order to reach a bigger success. But also, the world soccer World Cup is on right now. There's soccer being played from all over the world, different countries, and I confess that I've sat and watched several of the games because I love to try and analyze how things are going. And on one of the things that I was listening to this week was one of the coaches was talking about, I think it was one of the coaches said, it's not enough to practice and practice and practice until you get it right. The idea is to practice and practice and practice until you will never fail at that. In other words, you've got it right so many times, that's fine. But you've got to do it so many times that you will never fail at it. So there's a small difference of mindset of, I got it right. No, you got it right once or twice, but now you got to get it so that you will never fail at it. And there's a tweak in the mindset as well of how we think. And as Dan said, every problem is solvable. And then the only thing that stands in our way is our own limitations on our mindset. There's nothing to stand in our way. It's just our cobwebs in our own mind. I've always talked about the cobwebs in our mind. Get rid of the bloody things. We don't need those. But to get rid of the cobwebs, you've got to get caught in them, and you've got to fail in, and you've got to fall down and learn from that. And what was the lesson? So, this book that Dan was referring to, the Unbleep Your Mind, keep reinforcing positivity. Live in the positivity, live in it. There is anything that is negative, we just steer clear of it. It's a disease. We don't want that. Don't want any negativity. And
you bring up soccer in the World Cup, and it reminds me of a little clip that I saw this week from Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen the show Ted Lasso, there's so many great scenes in that really reinforce what we talk about on these Friday mindset calls. And one of them was, when you bring up practice, Lawrence, is, Ted Lasso's getting in his star player's face, who's faking like he's hurt so he doesn't have to practice. He's like, coach, it's just practice. And Ted Lasso gets in his face and says, I get it. It's just practice, but it's not necessarily, and he doesn't say it like this, but in a different way. He basically says, it's just practice, but, practice makes perfect. Practice helps you build camaraderie with your teammates. Practice, is just as important as what you do in a game, if maybe not important. And ultimately, Jamie keeps saying, it's just practice. It's just practice. And Ted Lasso says, okay, I get it. You're hurt. You don't have to practice if you don't want to, but you're going to go out and set up the cones for everybody who wants to practice. So it's like, practice is just as important as game day. You need to treat those practices and treat what you do every single day as if you're in the game. So along with that, like I said before during this call, is nobody is standing in your way except for yourself. Are you making excuses for why you don't want to practice? Are you making excuses for why you don't want to make that last phone call? Are you making excuses for why you don't want to make that last cold call? Are you making excuses for why you don't want to do this or that in your daily life? You need to think about that, because if you're making excuses, you're letting your mind control whether you're going to be successful or not. Because that last call, that last book that you read, that last whatever, that one more thing that you do may be the thing that breaks you through to being successful that week or that month or that year.
Yeah, I mean, the practice is what makes. Oh, you said that last week. Somebody said it. The practice makes permanent, not perfect, but permanent. So the more we practice and we become better at it, the more permanent that success from whatever we're doing will do. And the other thing that we can just apply this to our businesses is the communication that we have with our teams. It's not about, it's about our team. It's about us communicating in a more, I don't want to say more perfect, but in a more consistent way, in a more complete way, so that we are constantly creating this team that it's one for all and all for one. And we have the same goal in mind for everybody, and everybody's pulling at the same direction at the same time. I just by chance, it came to mind, I saw a boat race, one of these rowing boats, and everybody was, busy rowing and rowing, and one of the oars broke. And the person whose oar broke, it was an Italian team, she had no more oars, but she was still going at the same rhythm as everybody else that was rowing. And they won the race with one oar less, because the balance was there. And I'm just trying to put it into the practice that makes perfect, even though this person didn't have an oar, and where we can help and be part of and be instrumental in each team member achieving the maximum level of competence and perfection that they can, because we are replaceable. And it's about duplication. It's about the team. It's about just smoothly going into the next, with somebody else being perfect at what we do. Sorry, Dan, that was a little thing that had nothing to do with it, but
I'm sorry, I was falling asleep. Just kidding. All right, everybody. Well, it's 10 o'clock. Do we have any comments, questions we can address before we let you get enjoying the rest of your holiday weekend?
I think Martin came off there, or Jim as well. I don't know.
Oh, I clicked on to say thank you and happy Thanksgiving, but you guys always just bring something to the table, which is just great. And so I love the idea of the oars person who broke their oar, but kept going anyway. And what they did was they lifted the team. It was a great analogy.
Yeah.
That's teamwork.
The balance. Sorry, Martin.
No, that was good teamwork, very good teamwork. But then what you and Dan do every week for us is excellent teamwork, and to be able to you know, we don't all have the monopoly on the truth and the right and everything. And so to hear other views, other perspectives is always incredibly valuable. And I just thoroughly enjoy these calls. And sorry, I was on a little bit later than usual this morning, but excellent call.
Thank you. If I could just say, you know, here, Dan and I are very different in our personalities. He's very systematic. He's very disciplined about stuff. I'm all over the place, and I'm, you know, but the beauty about having our business is that our own challenges, and I don't want to call them weaknesses, less strengths, if I could put it that way, can be made up by people on the team who can make up for what we lack. So, you know, Dan is an example of a very disciplined guy, but he's also impatient. So, you know, he does something. So no, I've had enough with that. I said, no, hold on, let's just persevere a little bit. So we kind of balance out personalities, and I think this is the strength of a team, where you've got both sides, or many sides, many components, to make the team a very well-oiled machine. And I think this is a strength that we're allowed to have, and we're allowed to develop in this business. And the Catalyst is the company that allows us to have all the products, be paid on time, have a seamless operation in 50 countries, you know, responsible deliveries and all these kind of things. These are just the catalysts. So, you know, I think we're very lucky and privileged to have the possibilities of the teams that we have and that we can form.
They're the kind of ball bearings of the business, in a sense. They make it run very smoothly, because it takes out, it's like it says out in that document, The Deal of the Century. What the company is able to do is to remove the doubts and the concerns that we would otherwise have to put energy into. And so the goal here is to be able to enable us to facilitate our putting the energy purely into the things which are relevant for us, and money for us. And I think that's great. And it's funny, a quote came to my mind, and I was thinking about you two guys, but also the rest of the team, which is interesting, because what we're expressing, in a sense, is our love. And what brought that to mind was this quote from Khalil Gibran, which basically says, work is love made visible. And you guys are making this visible for us today. So thank you for that.
I'm glad you mentioned that book, Martin, The Prophet, and several of the books he's written. Khalil Gibran was my hero when I was about 18. I used to read every one of his books and quote them and all the rest of it. So you're right. Work is love made visible. So that's what we said, right?
Yes.
And that's why it's important to be able to identify what you do, what you want, and the work you do, because people get into doing something just as an expedient way of doing things. But that's why when we talk about who are you, how well do you know, what do you want? If you do something that you do because you have to, it becomes a pain. But if you do something you love, as in personally, I'm speaking for myself, that I love, it's not work, it's fun. I just have a ball. Absolutely have a ball. That's all I care about. It's just having fun. But it's having fun helping people. For me, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. Hey, Lawrence, you know, it's funny because I think you do kind of exude this, and that is that earlier you were talking about facing your problems. And to me, it's like a mindset is each of those problems is truly your opportunity. I think Dan has mentioned that before, you know. So you're really facing your opportunities. And I have to tell you, that when you read the Og Bandino, I used to always think, oh, this is great, this Og Bandino quote. And I just came up with my own version of the Og Bandino quote, because in this case, he talks about the slaughterhouse of failure. Well, you don't want to set that into your mind. So what I say is the castle of success is in front of me. I persist because I see my success, I feel it, and I'm achieving it. And that means you're achieving it right now, even though you may not know it. You're already a millionaire because you're achieving that success.
Fantastic. And in fact, if you get this book, this thing about the, whatever it was called, the Success Journal, and you do your, what did they call it? The definite purpose statement. That's basically what you do. What you've just said, Jim, is your definite purpose statement. It is December 2023. And I am a fill in the blank. And I'm achieving fill in the blank. So you're projecting yourself to 2023 and who you are. So you put that in your mind right from the beginning. So now you know who you are. You know where you are. And now it's just the steps of getting there. So what you've just, what you've just put it into a different, in a nice, in good words, is your definite purpose statement.
When you believe it, you will achieve it.
Yes.
There you go.
100%. 100%.
Awesome. Yep. Well, thanks everybody. I'm thankful for getting on here, obviously for spending time with family. I'm up in Connecticut, spending time with Kate's family, and you all are part of our family as well. We're a big family. We get together on Fridays and other days of the week to talk about our business and personal things. And so I'm thankful for all of you that are regulars on here on Fridays and who contribute. Julie put a great comment in the quotes. Look for people you're lacking in certain areas. It wouldn't work as well if we were all the same. We all have our differences, but we all bring something to the table that can help us achieve what we want to achieve.
That's true. I'm also very grateful to everybody as well, Dan, and I'm especially grateful to you for being a consistent partner in these Friday calls, because it's part of a joyful way of working together and helping other people. So thank you. Thanks everybody as well.
Everybody.
For your persistence on being here also, Martin and Dan, and Martin and Jim and Riley and the Ripples and Carly and Julie and Dee Dee. Of course, Dee Dee, she's in here all the time. And usually we've got Dr. Tierce and everybody else. So thank you all for being persistent and being on the calls and for being part of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you guys for all the work that you do. These calls.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
You too.
Bye, guys.